The Ancient Beckoning. Narrator's voice, low and grave, with a hint of mystery. The city of Cairo breathes. It's an ancient living thing, a labyrinth of dust and dreams where modern life brushes against forgotten histories. In the heart of its oldest quarter, Al-Ghoury, time seems to fold in on itself, much like the faded pages of an old manuscript. Here, narrow alleyways twist into an endless maze, flanked by buildings that have stood for centuries, their sun-baked stones whispering tales of sultans, merchants, and the myriad unseen entities believed to dwell just beyond the veil of perception. It was into this deep current of history, this palpable sense of ancient presence, that Omar and Layla unknowingly stepped, drawn by an irresistible, yet ultimately horrifying, allure. Omar, a pragmatic engineer grounded by blueprints and tangible facts, and Layla, a budding artist with a soul attuned to beauty, nuance, and the subtle energies of the world, were a modern Egyptian couple. They had grown weary of the soulless, cramped apartments of New Cairo, where life felt sterile and disconnected from the vibrant pulse of their heritage. Their shared dream was to find a place with genuine character, a home that resonated with Egypt's profound soul. A place where the past was not just a memory, but a living, breathing part of the present. When they stumbled upon the listing for a sprawling, remarkably affordable house nestled deep within Al-Ghoury, just a stone's throw from the ancient, bustling Khan el-Khalili Bazaar, it felt less like a real estate opportunity and more like an auspicious sign from the universe. It was a discovery that sparked an immediate, almost spiritual connection within Layla. "This is it, Omar," she'd breathed, clutching his arm, her eyes shining with an almost childlike wonder. "This is where we're meant to be." The house itself was a relic, a testament to forgotten eras. 3 stories of faded sandstone rose majestically from the narrow street, its facade weathered by countless Khamsin winds and 1,000 forgotten dawns. Intricate mashrabia windows, carved from dark, aged wood, latticed the upper floors, each delicate screen hinting at vanished grandeur and the private lives once lived within. The main entrance, a colossal wooden door thick and studded with rusted iron, looked like it belonged to a medieval fortress, a gate guarding secrets rather than simply providing passage. Inside, the house was a cavernous space, a cool, quiet sanctuary from the relentless heat and noise of Cairo. High ceilings, supported by robust dark wood beams, soared overhead. The air was heavy with the scent of dust, old wood, and something else, a complex aroma that was indefinably sweet, like dried rose petals, yet faintly melancholic, like old parchment. A central courtyard open to the vast Egyptian sky served as the heart of the home, now overgrown with fragrant jasmine and vibrant bougainvillea, their tendrils clinging to the crumbling walls, as if seeking to reclaim what was lost. "It's perfect, Omar," Layla had exclaimed, her voice echoing in the grand space, her eyes wide with a painter's awe as she traced the faded geometric patterns on a crumbling tiled wall. "Imagine the light through these windows for my paintings, and the history, it's palpable. Every stone tells a story." Omar, though less romantic than his wife, was equally impressed by the sheer scale of the house and its improbable affordability. He ran a hand over a rough stone pillar, feeling the cool, textured surface. "It needs a lot of work, Layla, a lot of work. New wiring, plumbing, structural repairs. But yes, it's got good bones, a true piece of history." They bought it. The transaction was surprisingly swift, almost too easy, as if the house itself was eager to claim new occupants. The previous owner, a distant, frail relative of a family that had resided there for generations, seemed remarkably eager to be rid of the property. He spoke little of its past, citing only old age and too many bad memories as his reasons for selling, his eyes holding a haunted, distant look that Omar dismissed as the wariness of an old man. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of activity, a symphony of hammers and brushes. The couple, along with a small, cheerful team of local workers, stripped away decades of grime, painted over peeling plaster with fresh light colors, and polished ancient marble floors until they gleamed. The house slowly began to shed its decrepit skin, revealing tantalizing glimpses of its former glory, like an old portrait being carefully restored. Yet, even amidst the cheerful chaos and the hopeful hum of renovation, there were things, subtle anomalies that whispered at the edges of their perception. Layla, ever the more sensitive and intuitive of the two, was the first to notice them. The faint, elusive scent of oud or rich rose water, lingering in a doorway when no one in the house was wearing perfume. The distant, almost ethereal chime of an unseen bell, so faint it could have been imagination. The way the air in certain rooms would suddenly drop several degrees, making the hairs on her arms prickle with an inexplicable chill, a sensation that had nothing to do with drafts.
"Did you hear that, Omar?" she'd ask, pausing with a paintbrush mid-stroke, her brow furrowed in concentration.
A whisper, almost like someone calling my name, just from the next room. Omar, always busy wrestling with stubborn old wiring or leaky pipes, would dismiss it with a good-natured chuckle. It's the old pipes, Habibti, settling into their new routine, or the wind playing tricks in these ancient walls. This place has been alive for centuries. It's bound to creak and groan. He had a logical explanation for everything, a testament to his engineering mind. But the wind didn't play tricks with physical objects. One sunny afternoon, Layla found her favorite paintbrush, the one with the worn handle, which she'd meticulously cleaned and left upright in a jar on her easel, lying perfectly flat and perfectly straight in the middle of the courtyard, as if placed there deliberately. No one else had been in the courtyard, and the air was still. Another time, Omar swore he saw a shadow, too fast, too dark, and too defined to be an illusion, flit across the top of the grand, curving staircase, disappearing just as quickly as it appeared. When he called out, his voice echoing in the silence, there was no answer, and no one else was on that floor. They shrugged, attributing it to fatigue, the strangeness of settling into such an old house, or perhaps the playful nature of their own overworked imaginations. As they settled in, the incidents grew less subtle, more insistent. The whispers became clearer, though still indistinct, like a muffled conversation just beyond a closed door, the words always just out of reach, tantalizingly close to comprehension. They sounded like many voices, overlapping, sometimes sorrowful, sometimes agitated, sometimes with an underlying tone of cold anger. Layla would wake in the dead of night, her heart pounding, convinced someone was standing over her, their unseen presence pressing down on her, only to find the room empty, save for the oppressive weight of unseen eyes. The feeling of being watched was constant, a chilling companion that crept into every room. "I can't shake this feeling, Omar," she confessed one evening, clutching her cup of mint tea, her knuckles white. Her voice was thin, strained. "It's like we're not alone. The house, it feels like it's watching us, listening to our every move, almost judging us." Omar, though beginning to feel the creeping chill himself, the unease gnawing at the edges of his own steadfast pragmatism, tried to reassure her. He pulled her closer on the ancient sofa. "It's just the adjustment, love. Old houses have character, remember? They have echoes of the lives lived within them." He wanted to believe his own words, but there had been no tremor, no vibration, no strong breeze. Just a sharp, violent crash from the living room, followed by an immediate, profound, almost defiant silence that seemed to mock their disbelief. It was too deliberate to be accidental.
They started locking doors, even inside the house, a subconscious effort to create boundaries against the unseen. They found themselves checking closets, peering behind heavy curtains, a nascent dread curling in their stomachs. Omar, despite his ingrained skepticism, began researching the house's history more deeply, driven by a growing, unsettling curiosity. He went beyond the cursory real estate notes, delving into municipal archives, old property records, and even speaking to elderly residents in the neighborhood's ancient coffee shops and narrow alleyways. He painstakingly pieced together fragments of information, whispered rumors, and forgotten tales. The house, it turned out, had a far more disturbing past than anyone let on. It was known locally, among the truly ancient residents, as Bayt Al-Sadaq, the House of Truth, but not for any benevolent reason. The name seemed to be tinged with an ironic, bitter sorrow. Its last widely known occupants, a wealthy merchant family named Al-Ghoury, had vanished abruptly in the late 19th century. Not just moved away to another city or country, but vanished. No trace, no forwarding address, no explanation. Just an empty, silent house left behind, as if swallowed whole by the earth. Before them, there were whispers of strange, debilitating illnesses that plagued the family, unexplainable misfortunes that struck without warning, and children who cried incessantly without cause, their wails echoing through the silent nights. Some spoke of the house being built over an ancient, forgotten well, a place where energies from below, from the very depths of the earth, could seep into the world, twisting reality. And then, there were the jinn. The old men in the coffee shops, their faces weathered like ancient papyrus, spoke of them in hushed, reverent tones, their voices barely above a whisper. Not the malicious, fire-born demons of popular myth, but the trickster jinn, the personal companions, Kareen, who shadowed humans, the earthbound spirits who lingered, attached to places, to objects, to emotions. They were said to be drawn to old places, places steeped in history, where the veil between worlds thinned, where forgotten prayers mingled with ancient sorrows. And if provoked, or if their domain was disturbed, their presence could turn from benign curiosity to something far, far more sinister. They were known to play cruel tricks, to sow discord, and in rare, terrifying cases, to possess or destroy.
One sweltering afternoon, while inspecting the house's incredibly deep and neglected cellar, Omar stumbled upon a cleverly hidden compartment behind a loose stone in the oldest, dampest part of the foundations. Inside, wrapped in several layers of decaying, moth-eaten cloth, was a small, intricately carved wooden box. It was remarkably old, its wood darkened by centuries, and it emanated a peculiar, unnatural coolness that settled in his bones despite the oppressive heat of the cellar. When he cautiously opened it, he found nothing but a handful of dried, crumbling herbs, unidentifiable, but smelling faintly of something burnt and bitter, and a single, tarnished silver amulet shaped like a stylized, unblinking eye. There was also a faded, almost unreadable parchment, brittle with age, written in a crude, archaic Arabic script that even Omar, with his native tongue, struggled to decipher fully. He brought it to Layla, his hands trembling slightly, an unprecedented tremor that spoke volumes of his unease. "Look what I found." Down in the cellar, Layla carefully took the amulet. It felt strangely heavy in her palm, almost warm now, despite its initial coolness. A faint, unsettling tremor ran through her body, a sense of deep foreboding. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Omar, with the help of a friend who was an Arabic scholar specializing in ancient texts, managed to decipher parts of the fragmented parchment over the next few days. It was a plea, a desperate, anguished plea for protection, a desperate attempt to bind something. It detailed a family, undoubtedly the Al-Zahrawis, who had sought to contain a malevolent presence, to seal something away. It spoke of the unseeing eyes that watch from the darkness, the breath of the Khamsin within the walls that steals life, and the stolen peace that would never return. The parchment ended with a chilling, almost despairing line, "May the truth remain hidden, lest it consume all who dare to uncover it." The ominous implication hung heavy in the air between them. The discovery of the box and the parchment intensified the manifestations almost immediately, as if their act had breached a protective barrier. The whispers became more distinct, almost forming words, though always just out of reach of full comprehension, like a conversation happening underwater. They were no longer just background noise. They seemed to respond to their presence, to their thoughts. Layla began to see them more clearly now. Figures, ethereal and shadowy, flickering in her peripheral vision, a tall, gaunt man in a long, flowing robe, standing silently at the top of the grand staircase, observing her with an unnerving stillness. A small, dark child crouched in the corners of rooms, watching her with unsettlingly empty eyes, its tiny form radiating an immense sadness.
She tried to tell Omar, her voice trembling, her words tumbling out in a rush. But her description sounded wild, hysterical even to her own ears. "I saw him, Omar. The man from my nightmares, right there in the hallway. And the child just stared at me with those empty, ancient eyes. It's not just whispers anymore." Omar held her, pulling her close, trying to calm her racing heart. But his own blood ran cold. He had seen things too, though he hadn't dared voice them until now. A small wooden toy, a horse Layla had placed on a bookshelf, now turned to face the wall, its head bent, as if in sorrow or shame. The constant intrusive sensation of being touched, a cold finger tracing a path down his spine when he was alone in the room. The insidious feeling of being utterly drained, physically and mentally exhausted, even after a full night's sleep. The house was feeding on them, on their energy, their fear. They started to sleep with a low light on, huddled together, listening to the ominous creaks and groans of the ancient house. The air grew heavier, thick with an unseen presence. They considered leaving, but where would they go? Their savings were tied up in this house, their dream home. And a terrifying thought began to creep into their minds. What if the entity, whatever it was not bound to the house, but to them now? What if they had become its new hosts, its new source of sustenance?
Then came the night. The night the crescendo of terror reached its peak. They were both asleep, a fitful, uneasy slumber, when a blood-curdling scream tore through the silence of the house, slicing through the night like a sharpened blade. It was Layla. Omar jolted awake, his heart hammering against his ribs, to find her thrashing wildly beside him, her eyes wide with unadulterated terror, staring at something he couldn't yet see, something that existed only in her waking nightmare. "It's here!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the foot of their bed, her voice raw with fear. "They're here! They want us to see! They want the truth! They're all around us!" The room grew impossibly, suffocatingly cold, a bone-deep chill that seeped into their very marrow. The faint, sweet scent of rosewater that had lingered for weeks was now cloying, overpowering, almost sickly. The whispers were no longer indistinct. They were a cacophony, a swirling, overlapping chorus of myriad voices filling the room, pressing in on them from every direction. They sounded angry, sorrowful, and utterly tormented, a chorus of suffering that seemed to claw at their sanity. And then, a clear, guttural whisper, right next to Omar's ear, so close he felt a phantom breath on his skin. It wants what was taken. The balance must be restored. Omar grabbed Layla, pulling her close, shielding her with his body, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He fumbled for the bedside lamp, flicking it on, then every light in the room, flooding the space with harsh illumination. But the shadows seemed to defy the light, clinging to the corners, deepening and shifting, refusing to be banished. He could hear scratching, tearing, and scraping sounds from inside the walls, as if something immense and desperate was trying to claw its way out, or in. The very house groaned as if in pain. "We have to leave," Omar whispered, his voice hoarse with fear, barely a sound. "Now, Layla, we just leave everything and go." But as they scrambled out of bed, adrenaline coursing through their veins, the heavy, ancient wooden door to their room slammed shut with an echoing, resonant bang that vibrated through the floorboards. They tried the handle. It was locked. Trapped. The cacophony of whispers intensified, growing into a guttural moan that seemed to emanate from the very stone of the house, a lament of ages. From the hallway outside, a child's mournful wail began, a chilling, soul-piercing sound that echoed through the empty chambers, growing louder, closer with each passing second. And then, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps, dragging slowly, deliberately, down the main staircase, heading towards their room. Thump, scrape, coming closer. Each step resonated with a terrible finality. Layla was sobbing uncontrollably now, her body convulsing, huddled against Omar. "What do they want? What truth do they want us to know?"
Omar's mind raced, desperate for an answer. He remembered the parchment, the amulet, the desperate plea for protection. "The box, the amulet, where did you put it, Layla?" They searched frantically, their hands shaking as they tore through drawers and tossed aside blankets. The small wooden box they'd placed on the bedside table was gone, vanished. Their minds were a whirlpool of fear and confusion. What was the truth the Al-Sahrawis had tried to hide? What had been taken that the entities so desperately wanted back? The footsteps stopped directly outside their door. The child's mournful wail ceased abruptly, replaced by a chilling, profound silence that felt heavier than any sound. Then a single, clear, elderly voice, laden with an unimaginable sorrow and a profound weariness, spoke from just outside their door. It was barely a whisper, yet it filled the room, seeping into their very bones. "You awoke what was put to rest, the sorrow of the many for the one who was lost, the truth of the sealed well, the sacrifice. It demands release. It demands what was promised." Omar and Layla stared at the door, paralyzed by a terror so absolute it robbed them of movement. The voice, ancient and despairing, spoke again, closer now, as if the entity had somehow passed through the solid wood, its presence now undeniably within the room, though unseen. "The well, the child, the broken promise. Return what is owed." Omar's mind flashed back to the dusty municipal archives, to the ancient well mentioned in the historical documents, the one the house was supposedly built over, and the shadowy, sorrowful child Layla had seen in her waking hours. The horrible, gut-wrenching realization dawned on him, chilling him to the core. The amulet, the dried herbs, the desperate plea of the Al-Sahrawis to bind something. Was it to contain a restless spirit? A child, perhaps, lost or even sacrificed in some forgotten, terrible ritual to appease something darker that lay beneath the house, something that fed on the very essence of life. Was this the truth that couldn't be revealed? The terrible secret the house had guarded for centuries? Just then, Layla's eyes darted to the ornate mashrabia window. Outside, through the intricate, shadowy carvings, the first faint hint of dawn was breaking, a pale golden glow against the receding darkness of the sky. And as that fragile light, however faint, touched the room, pushing back against the oppressive night, the suffocating cold began to recede. The whispers, the wails, the scraping sounds from within the walls, all began to fade, like a terrifying tide pulling back from the shore, leaving behind only the cold, damp sand of memory. The door, with a soft, almost mournful click, unlocked itself. They didn't look back. They didn't grab anything. They simply ran out of the house, stumbling into the still sleeping, dew-kissed alleyways of Al-Ghoury, their hearts pounding in their ears, their minds reeling from the horrors they had just witnessed. They didn't stop until they reached the bustling main streets, where the growing sounds of life and commerce, the shouts of street vendors, and the honking of taxis began to drown out the lingering echoes of the terrifying silence they had left behind. They never returned to the house in Al-Ghoury. They couldn't. They sold it quickly, at a significant financial loss, to a distant relative who preferred not to ask too many questions, dismissing their incoherent warnings as the ravings of stressed city dwellers. Omar and Layla moved to a modern apartment, far from the ancient, whispering heart of Old Cairo, far from the tangles of history and the unseen. But they carried the house with them. Layla no longer painted vibrant scenes of ancient beauty. Her art became darker, haunted by the shadowy figures she'd glimpsed, by the deep sorrow and anger she'd felt. Her canvases were filled with spectral eyes and anguished faces, her colors muted, reflecting the profound change within her. Omar, the unwavering pragmatist, found himself staring at every shifting shadow, listening for whispers in the quiet of the night, forever searching for logical explanations for the illogical.
He slept fitfully, plagued by vivid nightmares of ancient wells and mournful childlike wails. The house, Bayt Al-Sadaq, still stands in Al-Ghoury. Its old wooden door remains, thick and studded with rusted iron, an impassive guardian. And on quiet nights, when the Khamsin wind whips through the labyrinthine alleyways, carrying the dust of centuries, some say you can still hear them, the faint, sorrowful whispers that emanate from within its ancient stones, guarding a truth that was never meant to be uncovered, a truth of a broken promise, a restless spirit, and a silent demand for release, deep beneath the dust and dreams of Cairo. Because some darkness, once awakened, never truly sleeps. It just waits, patiently, within the cold stone walls, for the next visitor, the next soul, to uncover the terrible truth it has inherited, and perhaps to pay its ancient price.